I was scrolling on X when I saw a post about someone who made a web game using AI, and I thought, that looks pretty cool, I could probably do that. And then I saw how many views it had, and I thought, wow, I need to do that right now. So I yelled over to my assistant to cancel all my plans for the day, but then I remembered I don't have an assistant or any plans, so I just got to work. I started by trying to think of an idea for the game, and I remembered a project that I had done a while ago where I added a bunch of spheres to a scene and gave them all gravity and collision so it kind of looked like a planet forming. And that was pretty cool, but I didn't think it would make a very fun game to just stare at a screen looking at balls colliding with each other for hours, so I was trying to think of a way to use that concept in a fun way, and I thought of Kerbal Space Program and wondered if there was a way that I could make something like that. So I thought about it some more and I realized that since I know how to add gravity to a scene, I could add a planet with gravity and a rocket that the player can control, and the objective is to get the rocket into orbit. So now I need to figure out how to actually code this. The person on X said they used Three.js to code their game, which is good because that's what I made my gravity simulation out of. So I'm gonna try describing what I want to an AI to see if it can make it work. It didn't get it on the first try, but that's okay because I can just tell it what to fix and see if it'll be able to fix it. So it actually created something I can work with, which is really useful because I can just keep iterating by asking it to fix things, and then if it ever gets stuck on something, I can just go in and fix it myself. And this method of coding is called vibe coding, and the term came from a blog from one of the most popular AI researchers named Andrej Karpathy, where he describes it as fully giving into the vibes, embracing exponentials, and forgetting that the code even exists. And this isn't to say that making a cute rocket game in an afternoon is the same as coding frontier AI models with billions of dollars on the line like he does, but we're both writing code with AI, so I'll leave it at that. And delusional comparisons aside, vibe coding is usually a lot more effective when the person actually understands what they're coding versus someone who's just prompting to try and get an outcome. So I want to try explaining my thought process with this, just so it's clear that I'm not just throwing instructions at the AI and hoping it nails the task I give it first try, even though that's exactly what I'm doing, but like, it's more sophisticated than that, alright? So here's the general explanation, and this might get a little technical, but you're smart, I know you can handle this. So Three.js is kind of like a game engine that runs in the browser, so you kind of have to start with normal game development concepts, like you start by adding an object to a screen, but that object doesn't have any movement controls or collisions, so you have to manually code that in. So game developers normally start by adding an object to the scene and then adding gravity to it. The issue for me is that most games add gravity by constantly adding downward velocity to the player, but that's not how gravity works in real life. Luckily, Isaac Newton figured out this equation a while ago, so all I have to do is add the equation and plug in the numbers. The equation is force equals big G times mass 1 times mass 2 over the radius squared. And I know that sounds complicated, but hear me out. All it's saying is the force pulling something downward, like 9.8 meters per second on Earth, is equal to big G, which is just a constant that determines how much gravitational pull any amount of mass has. And our universe has its own value for big G, which is a really small number, but I can make it whatever I want to increase or decrease the strength of gravity. And then the two masses are there because gravity wants to pull every object to every other object. And if you have something really massive like the sun, then the force of gravity will be a lot higher. And then the radius squared on the bottom just means that gravity gets exponentially weaker the further away you are from an object. So what's cool is that adding this equation into the game is actually really easy. You can just add the equation directly into the game and update the big G value to make gravity stronger or weaker. And instead of adding a constant downward force to the player, you just change that constant to the gravity equation. It's actually really cool that you can simulate gravity and have it work the same way it works in the real world just by having such a simple equation. And it's also really fun to visualize. So with that simple equation, a lot of the game just works, and now we can work on making it interesting. So to do that, I started by trying to add a rocket to the scene. And AI is still kind of like a baby that struggles with object permanence and putting pieces together. So the current version kind of looks like a drawing that a child would give you that you throw away when it's not looking. And it's okay because it forgets the drawing ever existed a second after it gives it to you. And we can do the same thing with AI by telling it did a good job and then just rewriting all of its code while it's not looking. And you end up having to do this a lot when vibe coding. Like the controls it wrote were so bad that I had to spend a while moving values around until the controls actually moved the rocket where I wanted it to. So once I got that done, I started working on the camera because it was being a little weird and kind of lagging behind the rocket whenever I would launch. And I didn't realize it at the time, but the camera ended up being one of the hardest parts of this whole project. And the reason is because Three.js has a built-in orbital camera, but some of the behaviors that the camera was programmed to do really didn't work well with a rocket game. So I tried thinking about what the camera would look like if it was exactly the way I wanted it to be, and I decided it should always point at the same angle to the rocket unless the users specifically changed it. And I assumed there would be an easy way to do this with the orbit camera, so I just asked AI to fix it, but it couldn't figure it out, so I asked it again again and again and again, and it just couldn't get it. So I was like, fine, I'll implement a solution myself. So I searched up the problem on Google, and the first result was accounting for momentum and camera movement. So I was like, okay, great, that's exactly what I'm looking for. So I read the solution the paper came up with, and it said the best way to fix the issue was to predict where the focused object would be and account for that in your camera movement. But what I didn't realize was that the paper was written for making the camera lag behind when an object accelerates, which is literally the behavior I'm trying to get rid of. So I ended up going down a rabbit hole of trying to predict where the rocket was going to be and accounting for that in the camera movement, and it just kept not working. So eventually I was like, you know what, whatever. I'm going to get rid of all of the camera code that I added and add stuff back until the bug shows up. And this is actually a pretty common technique for debugging code because it helps you isolate exactly what's causing the issue. Because if you get rid of everything and then you slowly add stuff back and the bug doesn't show up for the first few things that you add back, and then the next thing you add the bug does show up, you can be pretty sure you found whatever's causing the bug. The only downside is it seems like it would be slower than just writing a console log or doing normal debugging techniques, but usually it's not. Programmers are just really susceptible to the sunk cost fallacy. Anyways, when I got rid of everything and had only the orbit camera left, I tried it and I realized that it was the orbit camera itself that was adding the behavior in. So I was like, whatever, why do we even need to use this orbit camera? So I told the AI to use a different camera, and it just made one from scratch, and it literally worked first try. And I was like, oh my god, dude. And it's always bittersweet when a fix to a bug is so simple, because it's like, yeah, I finally fixed it, but it's also like, oh my god, how did I waste 4 hours on that? But it's just part of the process. So at this point the game was pretty much done, so I aligned the rocket shapes and messed with the strength of the gravity until I found something that felt satisfying to play. So with that, the game itself is done. So then it was time to set up hosting so people could search up the game and actually play it. And I honestly thought it would only take like an hour to set up hosting, but I was so wrong. It was so bad. I started by trying to connect to my AWS instance, which is already a bad idea, because using AWS to host a web browser game is like if you were trying to change the oil in your car and you rented a crane to get access to the underside of the car. Like, it's embarrassing how insanely overkill AWS is for this. Which, to be fair, like 95% of the applications that run on AWS probably do not need AWS for it. Anyways, I first had trouble getting access to the AWS computer, and then I had trouble getting the code onto the AWS computer. And then when the code was finally running, I would visit the page and it was opening the wrong file. Like, this was so bad, and before I started the hosting, I had been coding for like 9 hours straight. But that's honestly just kind of how it goes with coding. Like, however long you think a task is gonna take, you can usually get a more accurate estimate by multiplying it by 3 or 4. And there's actually a law for this. It's called Hofstadter's law, which says that a task will pretty much always take way longer than you expect it to, even when you account for Hofstadter's law. So it's kind of just something that you have to learn to live with. So with that, the game was finally done. So I took a little video preview of it and made a post on X, and I went to sleep dreaming about how I would wake up in the morning and the post would have 100,000 likes and I would suddenly be extremely famous and wealthy. So I woke up and the post obviously didn't have 100,000 likes, and I was like, oh, surely it's because it doesn't have mobile support. And also people were a little confused on what the objective of the game was, so I quickly added some mobile controls and made it so you could spawn new rockets. And I was imagining that you could spawn like hundreds of rockets and make them all orbit the Earth, and it would look super cool. And so I posted that I made all the changes, and the post still didn't go viral, so I was like, okay, whatever. So that's kind of where the project ended up. I pretty much made a Walmart Kerbal Space Program, except significantly worse. But it's fine, like, I guess I learned stuff or whatever. You know, they say experience is what you get when you didn't get what you wanted, and like, whoever came up with that is so real for that. But still, given the option, I prefer to learn from success over failure. But it's fine. You can try the game out for yourself if you want. Just go to rocket.beckettoliphant.com, and I'll put a link in the description. And I might do more with this project, but I guess we'll see. So you should subscribe in case I do end up coming out with that. And also watch my other videos. The last video I made was actually really interesting. I made a legit app for Shopify, and I tried to see if I could actually charge people for it. Anyways, that's all for now. Bye.